Okay, well, this is the review for the Alamo, the SPI, and then my Decision Games version. And it's kind of hard to talk much about this actually, because it was obviously a design kind of on its own. You know, it's not part of a series, so there's not a lot of familiarity with the rules were designed on their own. I remember mentioning about in the old S&Ts about delays on the Alamo because of all things the line of sight rules, and then I don't remember who was writing it. It might have been Dunnigan, it might have been someone else. How can you get line of sight screwed up? Well, it turns out he's making a 3D map. You know, it's an intriguing idea. When it comes down to it, you just have to kind of use common sense, look at the line of sight rules lightly, realize you can shoot down the length of the wall. There's not a lot of effort being made to try to restrict that. And so some of the other aspects, there's a lot of die rolling in this sucker. Now, a lot of die rolling is usually something I really dislike, and I have to say I'm not thrilled with it here either. But I think there was an intention to get kind of more of that role-playing type aspect in the game. Not fully at that level, but at the, look, you're running around and you're shooting each other. Let's try to increase the narrative here with, oh, I hit you, I didn't just do some damage points to you. There's also this somewhat asymmetrical situation, right? I mean, yes, they're using similar weaponry, but in terms of the defenders are very, very small in terms of number of men. Yeah, very tiny men. And the attacker just has essentially an unlimited number of troops. Now, I've seen other games handle this. Constantinople, the Siege of Constantinople handles this kind of issue without falling down to, you know, having to represent it with these different hit effects and this, that, and the other. The biggest negative I have against this is really the rulebook. The rulebook is such a mess and such a pain to try to sort through and just absorb on the first try and then find things in later, because it is just kind of jumbled together. I mean, I've seen much, much worse. There's no question. But I would really prefer they had stuck with the old SPI style of rulebook. And I suspect the original rulebook for this was just as bad as the reprint. This came out at a time when SPI was playing around with the idea of trying to entice newer gamers with an easier format to rules, and they tended to screw that up and make it much harder to understand in every case. Kind of like when Avalon Hill goes and plays with their programmed instruction stuff. They just tend to get it all wrong. It's better, give us the legalese. At least you won't lose the people, you know, that already like it, and you're not going to get new people by making things worse. Anyway, in terms of play balance, I have no idea. We saw that this was kind of a close run thing. Where would the victory points have been had it ended about that point? The Texans would get one, so they were getting close. I think it was aiming towards a Texan victory in this one, no matter how you cut it. Perhaps in part because of a little bit of cheating on both sides or whatever. But my feeling with it is, you know, usually it comes down to the question of whether the Mexicans are going to run or not. And then after that, I think it's got to kind of boil down to this kind of really almost goofy trying to pin some guys down in the corner or whatever. And there's nothing that heroic in that. You know, once they break into the fort, it is really almost over. And by choosing to delay the game out and stretch it out longer, I almost feel like they lost the flavor of what was going on, because if you hunt down some extra men at the end inside the walls or whatever, it shouldn't matter. So my feeling is the Mexicans had a significant enough breach through it that they shouldn't have withdrawn anyway. I feel like the game just doesn't handle what the actual situation is. You swarm that heavily into the actual primary fortifications, you're not going to stop. And that was kind of a poor choice there. And if I played it out, I mean, you know, if the Mexicans don't break through, they don't necessarily win, but they take the Alamo. And then the question is, how many casualties did you cause? It doesn't really matter how long you lasted. That should be almost unimportant. What really comes down to it is how badly did you hurt them in that final fighting. So again, it feels like the victory conditions are a little off. The play of the game, not that exciting. I mean, there's a reason a game like this didn't ever get a good rating. It didn't get a good rating in the SPI magazines. It didn't get a good rating on the Board Game Geek. It's not a great game, but on the other hand, I kind of like having something like this to break out every now and then. Sometimes I'm in the mood for this. I feel the same way about Tito, which I like a little bit more, where I just want to, you know, set up something. It's not too hard. It's fairly traditional. Unfortunately, this one goes... this one's got a little bit too much effort with the rules. I probably would have been better off setting up a somewhat longer game like Wilson's Creek. And that's kind of the problem with it is, but you kind of think to yourself, well, I don't exactly want to just fight out another tactical battle that's like every other. Yes, there are special rules to each of those to represent certain special circumstances. But maybe that's not what I'm in the mood for. I want to stretch a little bit more, or I want to stretch a little bit more than an operational in the case of Tito. And you do reach for these. This one does it a lot worse than Tito does, in my opinion. And I think its rating shows that as well across the board. It's a pity because it is kind of an interesting idea to, you know, but other games have handled siege assaults better, I think. And there's also the, hey, why not handle the whole siege? That could be kind of interesting. I know there's other treatments of it. I'm curious if anybody's seen anything good, because this one's kind of a disappointment for me. But I'm glad I own it, I guess.